Hello, I would like to do a little video on distributive property, and I'm going to give you lots of examples. So first off, distributive property basically allows you to multiply a factor to the terms that are within a set of parentheses. So let me give you an example here. So say we have 2 times the quantity of x plus 1. So I mentioned that this was multiplication here. We're multiplying 2 to this quantity. And you might be wondering, well, I don't see a multiplication symbol between the 2 and the open parenthesis. If you don't see a symbol and you see a number next to another term, then you can assume that that is multiplication. Now these parentheses here represent a quantity, and notice there's a letter inside this quantity. This is called a variable, and this represents a number that we don't know yet. We are not going to figure out what the value of x is in this lesson, but we are going to be looking at expressions with variables for many of the lessons to come. So anyway, how we would read this is 2 times the quantity of x plus 1. Now, distributive property allows us to take this 2, which is a factor, and it allows us to multiply it or distribute it to each term within the quantity. Okay, so we're taking that 2 and we're going to multiply it to each term. So it'd be 2 times x, and then I'm going to add 2 times 1. 2 times 1. Okay? We're going to do a couple of these. Now we would simplify 2 times x. That's the same thing as 2x. 2 times 1 is 2. And so 2 times the quantity of x plus 1 equals 2x plus 2. Let's do some more so you kind of get the hang of it. Let's say we have 3 times the quantity of x plus y. In this case, we have 2 variables, and we have 2 different variables. So because the letters are different, they represent different numbers or different values. Again, we're going to multiply the factor to each term within the quantity. So we're going to get 3 times x, or 3x, plus 3 times y, or 3y. Okay, let's try another. Let's say we have 5 times the quantity of b minus 2. Now in this case, you might be wondering, b, I thought we just used x, y, and z. A variable can be any letter. Oftentimes we're going to see x, y, z, or a, b, c, but really you can use any letter. Again, we're going to multiply 5 times b, and then 5 times 2. So here we have 5b minus 5 times 2 is 10. Okay? And let's try one more with a subtraction. Let's say we have 10 times, we'll go z minus 10. See if you can figure that one out. I'm going to write down the answer. Okay, now, this is a really neat property to know because when we are solving for x, we're going to have to eliminate sets of parentheses. We're going to have a hard time solving if we have parentheses in our expression. So in a future lesson, we'll talk about solving for x, or the value of the unknown. And this property is really going to be helpful for us to get rid of these parentheses. Because you can see in all of these situations, we went from a factor distributing to both terms within the quantity to an equivalent way to write it without the use of parentheses. So more on that topic later. But let me go ahead and give you the formula that is generally associated with distributive property. A times the quantity of B plus C equals A times B plus A times C. Now, it could also be a subtraction symbol here, but generally this is the one that you're going to see in textbooks. I want to give you some additional examples that are slightly different than the ones that I gave you up above. Let's say we have 1 times negative x plus 3. So we're going to multiply this positive 1 to a negative x, and then multiply the positive 1 to a positive 3. Notice I'm talking about positives and negatives. So you want to keep an eye out for the sign of the factor that you're multiplying. So what is a positive times a negative? Well, a positive times a negative is a negative. Now, we normally don't write negative 1x or positive 1x. We just write the x. Okay, so we're not gonna write that out. Now we're going to take 1 times 3, so that's going to give us plus 3. Let's try another one, slightly different. This time the negative is on the outside. We have negative 2 times the quantity of x minus 4. Think about it. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x minus, and I'm going to show you 2 ways of writing this out. So I'm just writing what's here, minus, and then negative 2 times 4, this would be a positive 4, so it'd be a negative 8. Now that does look a little strange. So let me show you another way to write it out that might make a little more sense for you. So when you're multiplying the factors, look at the sign, include the sign that comes with the term. Okay, so here we have negative 2 times positive x. That's going to give us negative 2x. Then negative 2 times negative 4. That will give you a positive 8, because a negative times a negative is a positive. This is actually the way that I generally work out the problems. But both of these have the same value. When you see this double negative here, you can think of it as the opposite of a negative, which is a positive. Or if you're changing subtraction to addition, remember that formula? If A plus B, and you want to subtract it, it was the other way around. So say it was A minus B, and you wanted to change it to addition, you would write A plus the opposite of B. Okay, so if I were to make this into addition, we would change the sign to addition and write the opposite of this b term, which would be a positive 8. And that's what we have here.